I remember actually the first judge I interned for, he said that being a judge was the purest form of legal work because they get to decide what the law actually means. Really, that was really important to me. And I like, what does it actually mean? You know, it's not just what the words are, but what's the intent behind it?
Welcome back to CZ and Friends, the podcast where we talk with legal leaders, technologists, and operators driving innovation for their companies and beyond. I'm your host, Cecilia Ziniti. As a former GC founder and now AI exec, I know that as lawyers and business leaders, we love to keep up and stay curious and do that while leading well and getting better at what we do. That's what this show is about. All right. Today's guest is Jeremy Siegel. He's built a career navigating complexity, from AI to data privacy to cannabis. He's got an operator's mindset and a brilliant legal mind at every table he sits at. He's currently the general counsel at Final Bell and is the founder of Legal Mize, where he advises startups in sectors like AI, agriculture, logistics, and CPG. We've been longtime friends. We'll tell the story of how we met, but super excited to dive in with Jeremy, and we'll talk about what it means to lead inside the business, how to be the first legal hire at a startup, and why the best lawyers think like builders. All right, let's get into it.
Excited to be here.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Really welcome. Excited to dive in. Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So I have been practicing law now for 15 years, 10 years now here in California, and 8 in-house. Made the move in-house through, I feel, maybe the most California way possible, which was 2 weeks prior to cannabis becoming fully legalized in California. I joined a startup called Eaze to be their first director of compliance to build out the first compliance platform for a cannabis delivery platform in the United States.
Wow. So Eaze, it's kind of like it's direct to consumer, sort of like Instacart for cannabis. Or tell us a little bit about the business.
Exactly right. I think the initial kind of blank for blank, it was the Uber for weed. And it was, at its height, it was a very exciting startup that was trying to change minds and change regulations nationwide as cannabis became more normalized and as we tried to bring this new exciting modality of on-demand delivery to a industry where that already existed, but it was in a very different manner. So it was exactly like you said, Instacart. You'd open up a web page, and then it was very exciting when we were the first cannabis platform actually to get on the App Store as well. And you could place an order, and an employee of a dispensary would come to your house, deliver a packaged compliant product to you, and you could pay either via cash or via digital means.
So had you been outside counsel for them? My product counsel, feelers are just going off on all the issues that you just said. So many threads to pull. You got the App Store, you got the state regulations, you got employment regulations, you got marketplace. Probably can't even take payments, right? Yeah, it's just like walk us through.
If you Google Eaze and payments, you'll find a whole sordid story about that.
Oh man. Well, I mean, this is a podcast. There's got to be you got to tell the sordid story. You can't tease that, Jeremy. So what did you, I'm just fascinated of like, what even drew you to that where you're like, all right, that sounds crazy challenging. I'm in. Or like put us in your headspace of when you decided to go
that was
do that.
kind of it, actually. My first role in California was at a boutique regulatory firm that focused initially on alcohol. And our clients at the time were trying to do delivery of alcohol. So Instacart, DoorDash, Uber, Google Express, Postmates, Drizzly, you name it. We worked with all of those. So they tried to figure out how to navigate just a myriad of state regulations and trying to bring on-demand to alcohol. And as California started to legalize cannabis, operators in the space decided they wanted to actually hire lawyers that were not defense lawyers, and they were looking for lawyers that could help them actually navigate these new rules. So our firm, because it's expertise in alcohol, was a natural place to go. Through my connections, I brought in a couple of clients myself, and then through another role that I didn't get, actually, as our story goes, the newly hired vice president of legal and compliance asked me to be her first director of compliance at Eaze a month into her stay there.
Okay. That's amazing. So is there so you were at this firm that was doing highly regulated, then you were super intrigued at this kind of like new possibility. What's the through line in your experience, right? So you go to law school, and are you like, I'm a lawyer for new tech, I'm a lawyer for new weird things? Like walk us through that piece.
So coming out of law school, I was all set to be a project finance associate in New York, but this was 2009. And not everything worked as we expected in 2009. I was able to leverage relationships, mostly through Georgetown, to become a clerk at the Court of Financial Trade. And then I applied for and got a clerkship back in DC. And that pulled me away from the project finance route completely, put me more on a litigation path. And when we decided to move out to California, I was trying to find a way that I could take some of those skills and become more of a California lawyer. And regulatory space seemed to make a lot of sense, especially in one that is very California is well known for, which is alcohol.
Interesting.
So I
Okay,
was trying to
yeah.
find a space that I could create like a niche and a expertise, because I wasn't coming in to becoming an in-house lawyer via the more, I think, traditional commercial corporate roles. It was in a regulated space. So I wanted to find something that made me a little more interesting.
Wow, interesting. Okay. And when you think about going from, a law firm to in-house, how was that adjustment?
Best move I could have made, I think. For me, being at a law firm meant that you could only give advice. You couldn't actually direct change. And once you go in house, your words have more weight. You're being asked about things that are not purely legal. And as you build trust and relationships, you get involved in conversations that go far beyond whether or not this contract is going to be breached, or how we're what the next corporate governance question is going to be. It's much more integrated into the business itself. So for me, that was very important.
Got it. Okay. And tell us about your time at Eaze. So of everything you achieved at Eaze, what are you most proud of?
I think so. I was there for about 4.5 years, and the most exciting times for me was when I was traveling with my government affairs team, meeting with regulators, meeting with lawmakers, helping draft new rules and regulations, and educating people that were very afraid of this concept of cannabis on demand, and showing them that with technology, with guide rails, with information, with data, it would be beneficial both for consumers as well as for governmental agencies that were terrified of a new sin industry coming up and coming out of the woodwork. And that was so empowering to know that I was changing rules, I was writing laws when that was, and that, none of that was very legal, specifically, but it was really just kind of changing a conversation and playing a role in that. That was the most exciting part for me.
Yeah. What would you say is any meeting stand out with a regulator? And then what advice do you have? I think some of our listeners are adjacent to corporate affairs or adjacent to government affairs. So how did you learn that? And then what anything stick out about any particular meeting with a regulator?
I think that I was really lucky to work with a really talented group of people. I think Eaze hired way above its belt when it was working with tech money, so it was going to act like a tech company. But we had, a insanely talented group of public policy folks from Lyft and Uber joined us because they were excited about doing the next new thing as well. Like my boss came from Lyft. We had litigators from Latham. We have folks that are now product counsel at Cash App. We had just really talented people on the team, and it was a wealth. And so, especially with the public affairs team, I got to sit down with them. I got to meet with the lobbyists they hired, which are the best in the business, and learn a little bit how to temper myself, because I needed that, and also how to work collaboratively with within the system. So I think the most memorable thing was actually working with a representative when they were trying to figure out how to put into law this concept in cannabis around compassionate giving. So especially in the medical space, there are plenty of patients that don't have enough financial means to purchase what they believe is the medicine they need. And it was an idea that had been kind of contemplated in the act that legalized cannabis, but it wasn't fleshed out. So we sat down and we actually wrote in the language that was necessary to allow it to happen while still within the regulated space. And seeing that happen, and now seeing people I know building out companies built around that as well, has been really empowering and exciting.
Tell us what you mean. Give us a story. And then, generalize it for like what that means for in-house practice.
I think that I have a tendency of being a little too familiar with my words, with my tone. It's something I've tried to work on. I've been told I need to improve in the past, that I need to improve my executive presence. And going in-house, I think actually really attenuated that need, because I was talking to C-suite, I was talking to later on to the board members, but also communicating clearly and professionally to the rest of the company, informing them of changes we needed to make, development, etc. So, and especially when dealing with lawmakers and regulators, I couldn't be as brash, I couldn't be as direct, as funny at times, and it was a good learning for me.
Wow. Yeah. And what, in that process, it sounds like now you've worked for multiple founders. So tell us about working for founders and working for execs, and, your approach now to that.
I think having worked now for a number of startups, working for both founder CEOs and for CEOs kind of brought in as the company's matured, they're very different beasts, that's for sure. Founders have vision, they have passion, they have huge blind spots, I'd say. And I remember very distinctly getting in a very public Slack debate with one of the CEOs at Eaze over where a product belonged on the menu. And he wanted it to look be in one place, it looked better, and I was explaining to him that the definition of the product required it to be elsewhere. Looking back, I probably shouldn't have had that fight. It was new in house, trying to be very stickler to the rules, and it wouldn't. And when it comes to like what kind of risk profile, it was a very low one. That being said, he was very, focused on this. It was very important to him for it to look this way. And I kind of look back in that and recognize that giving into that would have probably bought me more capital with him.
Interesting. So you mentioned the calculus of like, I shouldn't have fought that fight. So one of the things in house, at least in my experience, is like, and I think you're right to generalize it to founders is like, so I actually heard someone speak was Sally Yu, the former general counsel of Uber. And she mentioned something to the extent that like, when she really wanted to do something, some new initiative, she had to mention it 3 times to Travis Kalanick, then the CEO of Uber. And, if it was important enough, she'd like make a note on her, the one-on-one document that every couple of weeks she would mention it. And I was like, okay, like I got his attention and I did it. So like that was one strategy. And she mentioned that at one of these women GC dinners and that resonated. But like in this case, in the moment, how do you make that decision? And this can be across every level, right? Some of our listeners are GCs, some of our listeners are brand new corporate counsel, maybe contracts managers, pick your thing. But when you're making that judgment call of like, how do I communicate about risk? What are the hills that I die on? What goes through your head now on that?
I think now it's very much, what is the audience? This was in a company-wide Slack channel. I could have taken this conversation offline, one-on-one, had it resolved, and it not made us both kind of look like we were just picking a fight to pick a fight. So I think there's some maturity in that. And then again, though, also just thinking about the business more holistically. The job of a GC is to understand the business in and out, to not think about things purely through a legal lens, but to think about a way to make sure the business is growing, succeeding, in spite of, and maybe, for risk at times. So I think that knowledge and that lens is much more important than I need to be right. This is the way it needs to be. This is what the law says.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a huge one. And I think it is coming into being a business leader is definitely, a theme we're going to be exploring here, and I think I saw it as when I became a GC, that was like the ultimate kind of like realization of that. So tell us about that now. So now you're a general counsel or you had your own practice. Tell us about your practice now and tell us about kind of being a general counsel.
Yeah, so the majority of my time is spent as general counsel for another company in the cannabis space called Final Bell, which designs and builds custom vaporization products for some of the largest brands in the world. It is interesting now that we've recently transitioned from being an actual cannabis company to being a cannabis adjacent company, which changes a lot of the risks and other considerations. And it makes things, I'd say, on balance, easier. It's a very small company at this point as well, as we've kind of shed some of the more labor intensive aspects of the business. Now it's most of the conversations I'm having are with the CEO, EVP, and directly with the board to kind of move us in the direction we want for things like profitability, global expansion, et cetera. And it's still very much a legal role, but I'm in on the conversations, or at least I force myself to be in the conversations if I feel like one's happening and I'm not getting enough visibility.
Interesting.
Separately, though, I've also taken on, you mentioned, I've spun up a little entity called Legal Eaze, where I have engaged with a number of smaller companies that don't need full-time counsel, but they also don't like the relationship that they have with a law firm. So I'm a fractional GC for, I think right now 5 or 6 different companies, different stages of growth, with different needs in different industries, which has been really fun for me because I get to stay interested. I get to learn new things. I get to, especially with the younger companies, get really involved with the decisions that are going to impact their growth or their success. And I'm finding it a good mixture for myself right now of just keeping myself interested and touching lots of different things.
Wow. So 5 different companies. Okay. So what's how did you decide to be a fractional GC? And then like, what did you put in place to do that? How did you meet all the clients that you acquired?
It's been, I think, 100% referrals. I have not done a single bit of marketing or outreach. I have been referred to, like a few of my clients have come to me through the law firms that have done their last raise or their longtime counsel on one aspect. They recognize that the company needs a little more dedicated support, but also doesn't need to be spending $1,200 an hour on a junior partner, or much more for a senior partner. It's also come through just relationships I've built. For instance, my legal ops manager at Eaze connected me to the head of HR at the current company that I'm working as well, just because they were friends. So it's all been word of mouth and relationships. I've spent a lot of time the last couple of years making sure those relationships all stay fresh, getting coffee with folks, reaching out to them, people that I've never even worked with, just because you never know when they're going to say, "Oh, I want someone just like Jeremy to help on this project."
When you're the first GC in a startup or you take on representation, maybe they've just raised, what do you do in the first 30 days? And how do you be successful in finding, how you're going to relate with that founder or that COO or that company?
I try to do a little bit of discovery initially, kind of ask the questions around where are the biggest risks right now? What is keeping you up at night? And then try to find out who are the people that most likely need the most support legally. Is it the product team? Is it HR? Is it the sales team? And trying to build relationships with them as well directly. Because I don't want there to be one person sending me all the work. Then it feels more like a law firm again. It feels like I'm very siloed and not getting the full picture. So my goal is with all of them is to try to understand where the business is going, what their goals are, and how I can support that best.
That's
For the
great.
earlier ones, it could be as basic as drafting their first terms and conditions and privacy policy, making sure their merchant portal is going to be working, reviewing their contract with Stripe. For the more established ones, it's making sure their current policies are up to date. California has its fun rule where every year you have to list how many times you've had requests for deletion, and most folks kind of don't remember that. So to kind of check those little boxes that I think just lead to better hygiene as well. I think with better hygiene, the less chance things are going to have to be reactive in nature, and that's kind of the goal.
Yeah, no, that's great. What do you wish more founders knew about legal as a function?
I hate when people say that the legal team is the Department of No. I hate that people think that legal is blocker. I think that the legal team can be your best partner and can make the company the most successful. Like it can lead it to its highest level of success if you work collaboratively with them and you don't leave them in the dark until the very end. Like the worst thing is when you go in and you see a document everyone's ready to sign and you're like, oh no, 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 we cannot sign this. It was a very bad idea. And then there's, 12 rounds on a document that would have taken two if you had been asked to opine earlier on in the process. So I think the biggest piece of advice is talk to legal early and often, and things go much faster.
Yeah. Any, let's see, when you have a good day at work, what happened that day?
So I think that for me, as I've kind of matured as a lawyer, and just like as an individual, it's feeling like I'm crossing things off. I haven't left things kind of hanging. I've spent the last couple of years trying to figure out the best way to kind of manage my workload and, my projects. When you can check that box on something and it's been a project that's been going for a while, and knowing that it's done and dusted and you don't have to worry about it again, that feels really good. But similarly, I feel like it also feels really good, like the first stab you've taken at a new contract, or the first stab at a new project, and you're excited about it, and you're going to be energized for the rest of it. That's also a really good thing as well. So it's both ends of the life cycle, I think, of anything legal. Feels good.
Amazing. On that note, so tell us about your involvement in AI. I think maybe you have an AI client. And then, yeah, tell us about your interest and involvement in AI.
Well, I did invest in this really cool platform early on through someone that I really respect, called GCII.
Cheers. Yeah. So full disclosure, Jeremy and I have been longtime friends. So funny enough, Jeremy actually interviewed for a role at a place where I was a new GC, and we didn't end up hiring Jeremy, which was probably a mistake, but the company wasn't, ended up not doing as well. Jeremy and I hit it off and we stayed friends, and he was among one of our earliest users at GCAI. But yeah, so tell us what AI you're using and how you use AI in your day.
Sure. So I can start. So I work with two companies right now that at least have AI in the name. One is a more traditional machine learning company that doesn't use any Gen AI at all, but it uses its proprietary tools to build out more products for pharmaceutical companies. And then that was a role that was kind of brought to me through friends. And then another company that was brought to me through relationship partner Wilson Sonsini after they did their Series A was one of these earlier players in the AI space trying to create agentic tools for institutional investors. And with them, it was really exciting to sit down with the founder and, at least initially, kind of help them figure out how they're getting access to some of their data sources, like doing revisions of subscription agreements and things like that, and understanding how much could they do with the data before having to give attribution and things like that. That was very fun because they were very, very much concerned and that they had all the rights to the data they were using. There was no scraping things illegally and trying to claim transformative use, things like that. So both sides of that has been really interesting to kind of work with. And also, just with some of the other companies I work with that are kind of in the UGC space or more like e-commerce, you get questions now about like, what are we going to do with our data? How are we going to use it? Are we going to kind of try to create some sort of algorithmic scaling of our offerings? it's fun to kind of just have those conversations right now because I think people are still trying to figure out how they're going to use this magic word AI, and if it's really just a bolt on to a traditional product, or is there something really transformative you're doing. And so, and for myself, I am a power user of GCAI. I use it many times because I have multiple clients. I have to kind of change my lens. I kept using that word, but I'm looking at things differently each time, and I love that I can create different profiles, and it knows the risks I'm looking at fairly well now because I've tried to build those out, and I can speak to it. I type to it. I don't dictate, but I'll tell it what I want to do. It's fun watching it going from what I thought was kind of an overeager intern to now being, a very, very good first pass. I can modify things. I can change things midstream. Now my end product is just done much faster, much more efficiently than if I was doing it myself. If I was trying to go and find, because no one actually writes stuff in like in the legal world. Everyone copies and pastes. Everyone finds good precedent, modifies it to the way they want to use it, and then claims it their own. Just AI does it much more efficiently, much cleanly, and it does a much better job maintaining tone as well, which I found.
Wow, that's fascinating. So you use it to sounds like for everything, like contracts, research, regulatory,
Yeah, I've used
communications.
to do comparisons of different different regulatory schemes, which has been helpful. Like I pull down the regulations for this in 5 states, compare them to me, tell me the biggest differences, put to the table. I recently asked it to. I was asked by a client to trademark a new venture for them. I was like, this is a horrible trademark. I know this is bad. It was purely descriptive. It was not at all interesting or distinctive, and I was going to just tell him that, because I knew that, but I wanted to see what an AI answer would look like. GCAI spat out this 10-sectioned ranking system. It's like 1 to 10 of like all the different factors you look at for the strength of a trademark and why this was like a 2 or a 3 on all of them. And it was
Wow.
nice to be, it was nice to have my belief supported, but it was also really neat to see the thought process that went into it.
Interesting. Oh, so you're a futurist, right? So you've done cannabis, you've done delivery, you've gotten into AI. What do you think the legal profession and in-house legal practice looks like in 5 years?
I think it's a little leaner, and I think it's faster. That's about it. I don't think lawyers are going to be replaced. I don't think an AI tool is going to ask the questions I need to ask to get that good output. That good output. I don't know. I don't think that. I think it maybe at some point, but not right now. Not in the near term. I think that a lot of the more mundane work can get passed off. I think that things like one of the first things I did as a lawyer was doing doc review. That should be done by AI forever and ever and ever. No one should ever have to do that. And there's no real value. I think an AI tool is actually better than humans are for that kind of project. So and similar things with diligence, reviewing documents for like very specific terms, and checking on limitations of liability again and again and again. And those are the tools that'll make just lawyers better and be able to actually focus on the interesting parts of it, thinking through the novel concept, trying to figure out how to get around a regulatory scheme that's going to be getting in the way of your growth. That's the lawyer's mind. That's not the AI's job.
I love it. What you mentioned kind of lawyer's mind and regulatory. So you were a clerk at a circuit court, is that right?
District court. I wish I was
Wow,
circuit
district
court. But yeah,
court. What was
district.
the
Yeah.
any fun stories from that? And so a lot of our listeners are, either we're clerks or, sort of I think for in-house, at least for me, I really love being in-house. I love the business, all the things that you mentioned. But I do sometimes really nerd out on like good lawyer things. And I feel like the pinnacle of that was being a clerk. And so just curious your experience as a clerk and if you still draw on any of those skills or stories or anything from being a clerk today.
I still email with my judge.
Wow.
He spoke at our wedding. I think that the clerk judge relationship is really special, because I don't think a lot of people outside the legal profession know that the majority of an opinion that's written is written by the clerk. And that collaborative experience with someone with such depth of knowledge and also such humility to work with someone fresh out of law school is a really, it definitely made me want to be more of a problem solver, I guess, versus someone that's just going to be creating documents. I guess that's the best way to put it. I remember actually the first judge I interned for at the Court of National Trade, he said that being a judge was the purest form of legal work because they get to decide what the law actually means. Really, that was really important to me. And I try to think about that when I'm reading something, like, what does it actually mean? It's not just what the words are, but what's the intent behind it? So I get asked often about things that the cannabis regulators are doing, and people are like, what's going on here? What's the real purpose here? These words don't make any sense, and I try to couch it in the terms of, well, you think about what was the actual goal here? What was the intent? Maybe they didn't put it down in the right words, but what do they actually care about? And focusing on that usually gets you to a better result than trying to stick to the letter of the law. So I think intent really matters when it comes to law.
Wow. Do you have a favorite regulation?
Favorite regulation?
Like anyone where you're just like, all right, CCPA again, let's go. Or any particular, like just for our users that like to nerd out, like what's anything that you're just like, I really like how the Copyright Act has a fair use section, or the TCPA exempts XYZ. Like I don't know, I just maybe a nerd test.
Unfortunately, I think being in a highly regulated space that I think by all accounts has been regulated poorly, like in cannabis space, I feel like I have my feeling is the other way. I have so many sections that I think that, wow, this is the worst.
Way.
Like in Massachusetts, they required that for cannabis delivery, there'd be 2 employees in the car at all times with dash cams and body cams because they were so fearful of cannabis being delivered to a house that they felt it needed so much more
Effectively
regulation.
doubling the cost for no incremental difference
Exactly
in
right.
safety.
Working at Eaze and having such a scale, we were able to actually provide data. I went to Massachusetts, I presented this, like that the rate of incidents we had where there was any sort of violence or loss of product or anything was much lower than pizza delivery. It was a fraction of a percent, so low.
Wow. That's fascinating. I mean, this like use of data for your job, I think is a fascinating one. I'd love to say more about that. Okay. Yeah. So I guess let's see. So before we wrap, anything you'd like to leave our listeners with? Final thought, lesson, or challenge, or like again on our themes of sort of personal growth. You talked about that. You talked about, tech, talked about being in-house. Anything for legal leaders to take away?
I think we're in one of the most exciting times we can be in right now when it comes to the law. There are so many different areas that are rapidly evolving that don't have rules that make sense yet. Autonomous vehicles, AI, drones, new medical advances coming out of the pandemic. I think we get to do really cool shit. And that excites me. And that's why I like being a lawyer. And being in-house, you get to actually not just do the cool shit, but you get to watch the cool shit get built. And you're going to be a part of that.
We're going to dive into the lightning round. This is where we go super fast. Don't think about it too hard. Jeremy, what is your favorite book?
Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. It was one of those books you read and I felt very seen. It was also the book I gave to my wife on our first date.
Wow.
So it has a special place for me.
That's so lovely. The most surprising lesson you learned from working in the cannabis industry?
The many different ways that people can hide cash.
Favorite part of being a lawyer?
Getting to tackle new problems and be creative in finding solutions.
Love that. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. It's been a pleasure talking with you. That was a conversation with Jeremy Siegel. I hope his journey from kind of clerk through to the law firm, through to giving birth to an industry around cannabis delivery, and now to his own firm and using AI spark some ideas for you on how we folks in legal in-house can show up and can really grow into advising and really changing the law. I'm Cecilia Ziniti. You can find me on LinkedIn or gc.ai and learn more about how we support legal teams.